Steve Jobs, the man who changed everything. Imagine a world without smartphones, without easy-to-use computers, without the devices that connect us every day. This was the world before Steve Jobs. He was a man who believed that technology should be beautiful, simple, and powerful. He changed not just one industry, but many industries forever. Steve Jobs was not just a businessman. He was an artist, a perfectionist, and a dreamer who made his dreams come true. He showed the world that computers could be personal, that phones could be smart, and that technology could be elegant. His story is one of incredible success, painful failure, and amazing comeback. From a college dropout who started a company in his garage, to becoming one of the most influential people in modern history, Steve Jobs proved that passion and vision can change the world. His life teaches us that innovation comes from thinking differently and never accepting that something is good enough. If you want to learn more inspiring stories about people who changed the world, please subscribe to our channel. We share amazing biographies that will motivate and educate you. Early life and adoption. Stephen Paul Jobs was born on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California. His birth mother, Joanne Skeebel, was a young graduate student who could not take care of him. She made the difficult decision to give him up for adoption. Paul and Clara Jobs, a machinist and an accountant, adopted baby Stephen. They promised his birth mother that they would make sure he went to college. The Jobs family lived in Mountain View, California, in the heart of what would later become known as Silicon Valley. As a child, Steve was curious and intelligent, but he was also difficult. He often got into trouble at school and had problems with authority. His teachers found him challenging because he was bored with regular lessons and questioned everything. Steve's adoptive father, Paul Jobs, was very important in shaping his character. Paul worked with his hands, building and fixing things in the family garage. He taught Steve the importance of craftsmanship and attention to detail. This lesson about perfection stayed with Steve for his entire life. Later, when he was making computers and phones, he would insist that every part had to be beautiful and well made. When Steve was in 7th grade, he met Steve Wozniak, who was 5 years older and loved electronics more than anything else. Woz, as everyone called him, was a genius with electronics but was shy and quiet. Steve Jobs was confident and loved to talk. Despite their different personalities, they became close friends. The two Steves spent hours together, with Woz teaching Jobs about electronics and computers. They shared a love of pranks and practical jokes. Their friendship was based on their shared curiosity about how things worked and their desire to build something amazing. During high school, Steve became interested in Eastern philosophy and spiritual ideas. He experimented with different lifestyles and became a vegetarian. He was searching for meaning in life and was not satisfied with traditional answers. College and early adventures. After high school, Steve Jobs went to Reed College in Portland, Oregon. Reed was an expensive liberal arts college, and paying for it was difficult for his working-class parents. Steve felt guilty about the financial burden, but was excited about learning. However, Steve quickly became bored with the required classes. After just one semester, he officially dropped out of college. But he stayed at Reed for another year, sleeping on friends' floors and attending only classes that interested him. One of these classes was calligraphy, where he learned about beautiful fonts and typography. Years later, this knowledge helped him make computers with beautiful, easy-to-read text. In 1972, Steve Jobs got a job at Atari, a video game company. Working there exposed him to the technology business. However, his colleagues found him difficult to work with because he was demanding. After working at Atari, Steve traveled to India to search for spiritual enlightenment. He spent several months there, but the trip was not what he expected. He did not find the answers he was looking for. When Steve returned to California, he was more focused on practical matters. He went back to work at Atari and reconnected with his friend Steve Wozniak. Woz had been working on building a computer in his spare time, and what he showed Steve would change both their lives forever. The birth of Apple. In 1976, Steve Wozniak built what would become the Apple I computer. It was not the first personal computer, but it was simpler and less expensive than others. Most importantly, Woz had figured out how to make it user-friendly compared to other computers of that time. Steve Jobs immediately saw the business potential of Woz's computer. While Woz was happy to give away his designs to friends, Steve convinced him that they should start a company and sell computers. Woz was reluctant at first, but Steve's enthusiasm eventually persuaded him. They decided to call their company Apple Computer. There are different stories about why they chose this name, but Steve later said he liked it because it was simple, friendly, and would appear before Atari in the phone book. To raise money for their new company, Steve Jobs sold his Volkswagen van, and Steve Wozniak sold his HP calculator. They raised $1,300, which was enough to buy parts and start building computers in the Jobs family garage. Their first customer was a local computer store that ordered 50 Apple I computers. This was their first real business success, but Steve already had bigger plans. He wanted to create computers that ordinary people could use, not just electronics experts. In 1977, they introduced the Apple Roman II computer. This machine was revolutionary because it came in a plastic case, had color graphics, and was much easier to use than other computers. Most computers at that time looked like laboratory equipment, but the Apple Roman II looked friendly and approachable. The Apple Roman II became incredibly successful. It was one of the first computers that non-experts could buy, take home, and actually use. Schools bought thousands of them. Families bought them for their children. Small businesses used them for accounting and record keeping. By 1980, Apple had grown from a garage startup to a major corporation. When Apple went public, meaning people could buy shares of the company, it was the biggest initial public offering in history at that time. Steve Jobs, who was only 25 years old, became worth over $200 million. Success and growing problems. The success of Apple II made Steve Jobs famous and wealthy, but it also changed him. He became more demanding and perfectionist. He wanted every Apple product to be perfect, and he was often harsh with employees who did not meet his high standards. Steve believed that Apple should create products that were not just functional, but beautiful. He studied the designs of luxury cars, expensive furniture, and fine architecture. He wanted Apple computers to be as elegant as the best designed objects in the world. In 1979, Steve Jobs visited Xerox's research center and saw demonstrations of revolutionary computer technologies. He saw computers controlled by a mouse, with windows and icons on the screen instead of text commands. This visit inspired him to create a new type of computer. Apple began working on the Lisa computer, named after Steve's daughter. The Lisa was designed to be much easier to use than any computer before it. Users could point and click with a mouse instead of typing complicated commands. However, the Lisa project had problems. It was expensive, and Steve's demanding style created conflicts. In 1981, the Apple board decided that Steve should not manage the Lisa project directly. Steve was hurt and angry about this decision, so he took control of a smaller project called the Macintosh. Steve poured all his energy and passion into the Macintosh. He pushed his team to create something revolutionary. He wanted the Mac to be the computer that would bring easier-to-use technology to everyone. The original Macintosh was released in 1984 with a famous television commercial that aired during the Super Bowl. The commercial suggested that the Mac would free people from boring, conformist computing. It was one of the most memorable advertisements in history. Exile and new beginnings. Despite the exciting launch, the Macintosh did not sell as well as expected. It was more expensive than other computers, and many businesses preferred IBM computers. Apple's board of directors became worried about the company's direction. In 1985, after a power struggle with Apple's board and CEO John Sculley, Steve Jobs was forced to leave the company he had co-founded. This was one of the most painful experiences of his life. He felt betrayed and rejected by the company that had been his entire world. But Steve Jobs did not give up. In 1985, he started a new computer company called NeXT. His goal was to create the perfect computer for universities and businesses. He wanted to prove that he could succeed without Apple. NeXT computers were advanced with beautiful designs, but they were expensive, and the company struggled to find customers. NeXT developed important technologies that would later become crucial. During this time, Steve also became involved in movies. In 1986, he bought a computer animation company from George Lucas for $10 million. He renamed it Pixar and focused on making animated movies using computers. Pixar's first major project was Toy Story, the world's first fully computer-animated feature film. When released in 1995, it was a huge success and proved that computer animation could create wonderful entertainment. Pixar created many successful movies, including Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo. Steve Jobs had found success in a completely different industry. Return to Apple. While Steve Jobs was away, Apple struggled with declining sales and lack of innovation. The company had lost its way and was making confusing products that customers did not want. By 1997, Apple was close to bankruptcy. In a surprising turn of events, Apple decided to buy NeXT for $400 million, bringing Steve Jobs back to the company he had co-founded. Initially, he returned as an advisor, but soon he became the interim CEO. Steve immediately began making dramatic changes. He simplified Apple's product line, eliminating dozens of confusing products and focusing on just a few excellent ones. He believed that saying no to good ideas was just as important as saying yes to great ideas. In 1998, Apple introduced the iMac, a colorful, friendly-looking computer that was easy to set up and use. The iMac was a huge success and showed that Apple was innovative again. It saved the company from bankruptcy and began Apple's remarkable comeback. Steve Jobs had learned important lessons during his years away from Apple. He was still demanding and perfectionist, but he was also more experienced and strategic. He understood better how to manage people and build successful products. The iMac's success gave Steve confidence to pursue even more ambitious projects. He began thinking about how Apple could expand beyond computers into other types of consumer electronics. The digital revolution. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a small device that could store and play thousands of songs. At first, many people thought it was too expensive and unnecessary. But Steve Jobs believed that people wanted to carry their entire music collection with them. The iPod became incredibly popular, especially when Apple created the iTunes Store, which made it easy and legal to buy and download music. The combination of the iPod and iTunes changed how people buy and listen to music forever. The success of the iPod proved that Apple could create successful products beyond computers. It gave Apple a new image as an innovative company that created products people loved. In 2007, Steve Jobs announced the iPhone, which he called a revolutionary mobile phone. The iPhone combined a phone, an iPod, and an internet device into one elegant product. Before the iPhone, smartphones were complicated devices with tiny keyboards. The iPhone had a large touch screen controlled by touching and swiping. It made advanced technology accessible to everyone. The iPhone became one of the most successful products in history. It created a new industry of mobile apps and changed how people communicate and work. Other companies quickly tried to copy the iPhone. In 2010, Apple introduced the iPad, a tablet computer larger than a phone but smaller than a laptop. The iPad created a new category of devices and became very popular. Legacy and final years. By 2010, Steve Jobs had transformed Apple from a near-bankrupt company into the most valuable technology company in the world. Apple products were known for beautiful design and innovation. Unfortunately, Steve's health began to decline. In 2003, he was diagnosed with cancer. He kept his illness private and continued working, but his condition gradually worsened. Steve Jobs gave his last major presentation in 2010 when he introduced the iPad. Even though he was weaker, his passion for innovation was still strong. In August 2011, Steve Jobs resigned as CEO of Apple, writing, "Unfortunately, that day has come when I can no longer meet my duties as Apple's CEO." Steve Jobs died on October 5, 2011, at the age of 56. His death was mourned around the world by millions of people who had been touched by the products he created. Flowers, apples, and personal messages were left at Apple stores in many countries. Conclusion. Steve Jobs changed the world by believing that technology should serve people, not the other way around. He showed that products could be both functional and beautiful, both powerful and simple to use. His greatest achievement was not any single product, but his approach to innovation. He taught the technology industry that design matters, that details matter, and that products should delight users, not just meet their basic needs. Steve's story teaches us that failure can lead to greater success. Being forced to leave Apple was painful, but it taught him valuable lessons. His years away helped him develop the skills he needed to create the iPhone and iPad. Steve Jobs also showed us the importance of following our passions. He chose to take risks and pursue his vision of what technology could become. His willingness to challenge conventional thinking led to innovations that changed multiple industries. Perhaps most importantly, Steve Jobs proved that one person with clear vision can change the world. He started in a garage and built a company that touches billions of lives every day. Today, the principles that Steve Jobs championed: elegant design, user-friendly technology, and attention to detail have become standard throughout the technology industry. Steve Jobs' life reminds us that innovation requires courage. It takes courage to challenge how things are done and to believe in ideas that others think are impossible. Thank you for listening to the story of Steve Jobs. His journey from adopted child to technology revolutionary shows us that with passion, persistence, and vision, we can create products and ideas that make the world better. Remember to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about people who changed the world. The next time you use a smartphone, tablet, or computer, remember Steve Jobs and his belief that technology should be intuitive, beautiful, and empowering. What will you create to make the world a little bit better?